I've come up with a concept called mindset-driven marketing. The most important thing, much more important than personas, is the mindset of the customer when they set out to buy. And that consists of their desires, what they want, their concerns, because they've been down this road before and they've been burned, and their questions. If you get past the desires, if they see that you know what they want, using their words to describe it, which is another reason you interview them, because you hear how they describe it. And then they come to your website, they see immediately that you get it, you know what they want, and then you immediately address their concern.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Today, we're sitting down with Kristin Zhivago from Zhivago Partners. She's a digital marketing expert and really helps entrepreneurs sell the way their customers want to buy. Kristin, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, Kristin, what is the biggest mistake you see over and over and over again in small business as it relates to digital marketing?
Actually, there's two. The first one is they're depending too much on AI or other tools to build personas for their customers. The problem with that, what AI does is just go out and scrape the web and come back with concepts and summaries. And so they're basically looking at what everybody else is doing. The problem with that is that your company is different, your people are different, your decisions are different, your product is different. Even if you're selling the exact same product, people buy it for a different reason. So what you really need to do, and this is the second biggest mistake, is you need to go out and interview your customers. And that's what I talk about in my book. I teach people how to do that. No holds barred, absolute 100% prescription on how to interview your customers, get them in an audio-only Zoom meeting, and ask open-ended questions that I give you in the book to ask them. I lay it out, chapter 3, to their customers is different than what the customers think is important. So that means that every penny you're spending on marketing is off target unless you're doing this. The good news is you can speak to 5 to 7 people of a given type. Like if you have different types of buyers, you interview 5 to 7 people of each type and get bankable answers. They'll say the exact same thing about a topic or whatever it is you're trying to find out, especially your brand, which is the promise that you keep. And they'll say they're real good at this, but they're not so good at that. That's what you need to know, because the first one is what you promote, and the second thing is what you need to fix in the background so that you get to the point where you can promote it.
Without naming a company, can you give us an example of just how far off a company was, where a company thought their customers wanted A, and lo and behold, their customers actually wanted X?
My favorite example is an entrepreneur who had built a program. He was a brilliant programmer with a brilliant team of programmers, and they built a program that you could use for field service applications. So if you were a company that sent people out into the field, this was the program that could help you run your business. The thing they were the most proud of was their ability to interact or integrate with QuickBooks, because QuickBooks, everybody uses QuickBooks. And because they were programmers, they were impressed with their ability to do it elegantly. So I went out and interviewed their customers, and they didn't even care about that. They said, oh yeah, fine, everybody interacts with or integrates with QuickBooks. What's the big deal? Which was hard for them to hear, by the way. But that's a baseline industry promise. Those are things like boats are supposed to float, airplanes are supposed to fly, restaurants aren't supposed to poison you, things like that. That's where they put that. It meant very little to them. What they really cared about and why they bought the program was because when you first started talking to a customer and you entered the data about that customer, that data automatically went everywhere else. So when it was time to send an invoice or a quote or give directions to your driver. It was all there. And if you ask any entrepreneur how much they love entering data more than once, to say, I hate entering data more than once. So this was a big deal, and this was actually an industry promise. I've been in tech for decades, and when IBM, of all people, came out with what they called a mini computer, which is the precursor to the PC, and they had a bunch of us in Silicon Valley go into a hotel room and introduce it to us. And some woman in the back of the room said, okay, if I enter this data once, will it then populate everywhere else? And I said, no. And you could hear the whole room just deflate like a balloon because that was the thing they were all hoping for. So that was their big deal. So we renamed the company from Pioneer Interactive, which didn't mean anything to anybody, to Field One. So it was out in the field. They were number one in the field. You only had to enter it once. And he ended up selling the company to Microsoft for many millions of dollars, and very happy guy.
Wow. So you mentioned in your book, first off, what's the title of your book?
It's Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy. And honestly, it was one of the first. Roadmap to Revenue, How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
I was one of the first people to identify the buying journey versus the selling process.
Tell me more about that.
Everybody talks about the buying journey now, but when I started this and wrote this book and got out there with it, nobody was really focusing on it. They didn't really think of it as a buying process. Now everybody's trying to do that because it's the right thing. When you're out to buy something, you actually have a buying process. And if somebody makes it easy and you get all your questions answered, you're going to sell more. Those people will be the ones to get the sale.
So the buying journey versus the selling process. So everybody was focused on the selling process. This concept of, hold on, let's look at the buyer journey. And when you talk about interviewing customers, which is the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs don't do enough of or do it at all, and that they need to do that so they don't waste their money on marketing. The reason why they want to interview their customers, is it about the buying journey or is it about the product or service, or is it both when you talk in that context?
Oh, it's both.
Okay.
Since then, I've come up with a concept called mindset-driven marketing. The most important thing, much more important than personas, is the mindset of the customer when they set out to buy. And that consists of their desires, what they want, their concerns, because they've been down this road before and they've been burned, and their questions. If you get past the desires, if they see that you know what they want, using their words to describe it, which is another reason you interview them, because you hear how they describe it. This is what I was looking for. And they say exactly what it was. And it's always very specific. They never say things that marketers say. I wanted something to make me sexier or richer or whatever. It's very specific. And then you pass that, they come to your website, they see immediately that you get it. You know what they want. And then you immediately address their concerns. What is it about this thing that you're worried about or that you absolutely have to have? What's the absolute gating factor? And then if you've passed those two phases, and it happens very quickly because you don't waste time with a lot of marketing blah, blah. The third thing is now they've got very specific questions. Does it fit? Does it integrate with this other thing? What's it going to look like on? What's the contract? How long? And I've also split up buying processes based on the amount of scrutiny that somebody applies to the purchase. In the world, there are 4 types of products: light scrutiny, medium scrutiny, heavy scrutiny, and intense scrutiny. Light is an impulse purchase, cheap, see it, buy it. Medium is like clothing, where you see it, you ask a few questions, buy it. All of these get more expensive as you go up. Heavy scrutiny is there's a salesperson, there's a contract. It's long-term, it's very expensive. These are cars and houses on the consumer side and B2B, it's like a ERP system or something. And then intense scrutiny is when you get married. It's all of the above, but you're in it for the long haul. And it's maybe a long-term project like building an airplane, or people who come to my company and we work together for years. That's intense scrutiny. And in each stage, there's more questions. There are more people involved. It's just much more complex. If you try to sell an intense scrutiny product or service, like gum, which is a light, you barely need to think about it. You don't need to send out a newsletter to teach people how to chew gum. And you shouldn't treat an intense or heavy scrutiny product or service like chewing gum. So once you know where you fit into those categories, and whenever I say this, people always know right away where they fit on that scale. And then in the book, I spend a chapter on each one of those, and I map out the buying process and the types of questions people ask. This book is a recipe. I've done it for so many companies, and it's worked every time. So I just wanted to get it out there for entrepreneurs everywhere to take advantage of it.
Okay, let me recap a couple pieces here, make sure I got it straight. We were talking about kind of the buying journey and the selling process, and you came up with this new thing, the mindset-driven marketing, which really breaks it down to three things: the desires, the concerns, and the questions. And that we should understand the mindset of the buyer in those areas. And one way to find that out, obviously, is asking them very specifically. Your idea of scrutiny levels, I thought it was very interesting. I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that go into partnerships with another entrepreneur and they form this company and they're now partners, but they do like medium scrutiny. They probably did it on the back of a napkin, when in reality, you're getting married. It should have been heavy, intense scrutiny. You should have made sure this is the right partner to partner with in your business. So I really connected with that. But you're right.
That's a really good point. I thought that's a very good thing that you brought up. When I see companies merge or start a new division, sometimes they are going from being one type of scrutiny product or service with its own rhythm and depth of questions and all of that, and they're trying to sell, like they're going from heavy to light. Maybe they want to come out with a new light product. The whole way of managing the support of the buying process is 100% different. And a lot of times it's not just politics, it's that kills a merger or a new division.
That's a great point. A lot of times, I just think about my own entrepreneurial history. We had a product or service that we were selling and it was doing really well. I guess we could say we understood the buying journey. We understood the marketing driven mindset of our product or service. It was working. And then we were so successful. Oh, this is so successful. Let's start this vertical line. And we started this vertical line. And it was a completely different level of scrutiny, different process, different everything. And we didn't succeed. We were wondering why that didn't work. So that makes a lot of sense when you expand your business or merge or grow, understanding that other business may not be the same as this business in terms of that entire buying process. And you can get yourself in some pretty big trouble that way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So today, as you work with entrepreneurs, I'm assuming you interview them as a business to find out where they all are in these levels before you help them. And that's the process to which you walk them down your recipe. Is that correct?
Yeah, I obviously need to know who they are. And our biggest rule here is we don't work with jerks. I have a jerk test that I won't reveal, but I can tell right away if someone's a jerk or not, because jerks just make everything harder. Nice people try to make everything easier. So we have no jerk clients and no jerk workers, which is great. It's a jerk-free bubble that we work in and live in, and it's really nice. So that's my only main concern. And from that, a lot of things flow, good things flow. Kind people make good decisions about their customers and their employees. So the company is usually pretty well run. I will say that the biggest weakness that I see in most companies is bad processes. They have strong people. They know the way you keep your promise, the promise that you keep is your people, your products, your processes, your passion, and your policies. They fall down in the process side. So I don't care about automation. Again, I've been in tech for decades. I love tech. I embrace all tech. But if you automate a bad process, it'll be a faster bad process.
Kristin, so far has John passed the jerk-free zone?
Yes, he has, but I'm not going to say why.
Okay. And wing, if I've passed.
Okay.
Winked, just to be clear.
Yes.
You had 5 P's you just rattled off. I
Yeah,
actually
good for
can't
you.
recall. I'm proud of myself. I want to know, I'm going to go through them one by one. I'd love to get your one-liner, if you will, on each of the 5, if that's okay. If we start with people, what would be the one-liner everybody should know with regard to people?
I lost the last part of the question, but before I answer it, I just want to say that my most famous saying is, branding is the promise that you make. Your brand is the promise you keep. The thing that people actually say about you when you're not in the room, that's your real brand. And that is the thing you keep with your 5 Ps. I've devoted my whole career to helping entrepreneurs understand these basic human concepts because people buy our products and services. And the better we get at that, the better we are. All right. So you talked about the people first, and what's my one-liner on that?
Yeah. What would be the one thing that you'd say, hey, if you're working with me and it's with regard to people, you're not going to walk out of our conversation around people without knowing at least, what would that be?
If I were evaluating a client, you mean?
Oh, just in general, that all entrepreneurs should know about people when they would interact with you. What's something that they would get around people?
Okay. I'm happy to tell people about my jerk test one-on-one. I just don't like doing it in podcasts. I don't want to give it away because it's very simple. Anybody can do it. I do know that the whole jerk thing starts at the top. So if you're a jerk, you're going to have unhappy people, you're going to have unhappy customers, and the whole thing's not going to work ultimately. Now, if you watch the movies and serials and all that stuff, it seems like the only guys who get to the top are the really awful, terrible, total jerks. And it's just not true in real life. The people that get to the top over time, the long-standing businesses are the ones who treat their customers well and treat their people well. A jerk.
Good. Got it. And what about products? What would be one liner on that?
Don't assume you think you know what they want just because you think it's good. There's so many entrepreneurs who have started businesses, especially technical entrepreneurs, where they think they have a great idea and the place they're working doesn't appreciate how brilliant it is, so they start a business, but they never do what I'm recommending. They never talk to their customers. And by the way, every CEO I've ever talked to says, I don't need to talk to customers because my salespeople are out there all day talking to customers. I always laugh and say, okay, when was the last time you told a salesperson what you were really thinking while they were selling to you? And the CEO thinks about it for a second and he goes, oh, never mind. So we're playing poker when we're selling, when we're being sold to, I should say. We're not revealing our cards. It's only after you've purchased that you're willing to give them information. You've invested in their business now. You want them to succeed. And so then you're willing to talk, and it's no skin off your nose to talk about why you bought something and how you bought it. It's easy to do. Anybody ask you any questions about why you bought what you bought, you'd have plenty to say, and you're glad to say it. So don't think you have the world's best whatever until you've interviewed people who either would be likely to buy it if you don't have customers yet, and not your friends, by the way, they have to be strangers, or you talk to people you've already sold to.
And what about passion? What would be the one-liner there?
You have to have it. If you don't have it, you're not going to succeed.
You're a litmus test. How does someone know if they have it versus they don't?
You either get up every day excited about what you're going to do that day and really just filled with ideas and constantly motivated, or you don't. And if you don't, you should go find something else to do. They won't say this is stupid because they're getting paid and they don't want to hurt your feelings and all that stuff. But the truth is, if it's not a good process, it's slowing them down and it's making life harder.
Likely to tell you about what's not working great in the process. How would you recommend someone break through that to get the good stuff?
You have to be relentless. My husband used to say, find it, face it, fix it. And finding it is asking questions. Don't assume, don't be the smartest guy in the room. Keep asking questions. How long did it take? Why did you do it that way? Wait a minute. Is that easy? Wait, you're doing that twice? Just keep asking the questions. And one of the questions I asked, is there anything that could be easier in your work? Is there anything that's stupid or ridiculous? I don't mind if they tell me, but I also never get upset if they say this isn't working very well. What they really mean is this sucks.
Asking questions and tap into that servant leadership I heard from you. What about the last one on policies? What's a one-liner there?
If you are a nice person, if you are not a jerk, your policies will be fine.
I don't think I'm allowed to ask you, how would you know if you're a nice person? Because that would give away the jerk test.
The interesting thing about jerks is let's put it another way. There are no babies born jerks. There are no jerk babies. Sure, my diaper needs changing. I'm hungry. My stomach's upset. Okay, I'm uncomfortable. They cry. All right, fine. But they don't manipulate. They don't do that until they get older and they're in the midst of bullying, which everybody acts like it's an amazing thing these days, but everybody I know has been bullied sometime in their life. So it happens, and you get out in the schoolyard or the daycare center, and suddenly you're being bullied. And that's the moment you decide, I'm either going to be a nice person and deal with this somehow in a nice way, or I'm going to retaliate, eye for an eye. And you start manipulating. You start working out. Jerks actually know who they are.
It's
A
interesting you
nice
say
person
that.
knows they're nice. Say that again. What?
I said it's interesting you say that because Rich didn't know. He had to ask you if you
Hey,
he was or
listen,
wasn't.
she winked. John, she winked, just to be clear.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but you had to ask because you weren't sure. But no, I guess it's an interesting point. Jerks really know they are. That's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
an interesting point because I know some leaders of businesses that under my scrutiny test and probably their employees, unfortunately, consider them to be jerks, but they don't know it or they don't portray that they know it. Or maybe they're watching too many of these TV series and thinks that's the way to win. I'm not really sure. But if you are, or maybe you are, and you're not sure and you're listening to this, what should you do to find out if you are or aren't? And what could you do about it? Or is it too late to do anything about it?
First of all, it's never too late. It's never too late to decide to be a nice person. The delusional jerks are the toughest to deal with. There's a spectrum. And on the jerk spectrum, there are people who behave in a jerk way without realizing it. And it's only a few things that they do that just they could break those habits and they'd be fine. That's minimal jerk. The massive, most difficult jerk is the one who knows in his heart of hearts or her heart of hearts that they are, in fact, making life harder on other people, but they don't care. And they convince themselves that they're fantastic. And by the way, they keep telling other people how great they are, other people. I know somebody like that right now, and that person is making the most terrible decisions about the business. He's going to literally run the business into the ground. He doesn't know how bad he is. His employees, who were basically working for the number 2 guy in the company and loved him, the top guy fired the number 2 guy, and now every single employee wants to leave. The guy at the top has no idea that it's so bad. He's completely self-delusional. And he's in an age where he's probably never going to change.
It's interesting. You were talking, earlier about these like levels of scrutiny, and there's levels of jerkness as well that kind of
Yeah,
marry to it. But you're
yeah.
right. It's interesting the turn that this conversation has taken a little bit from the perspective of digital marketing and branding and how to build a good brand. And it inevitably always comes back a little bit back to the internal brand you have with the people around you. And it just seems rich. Like we've had this conversation a few times recently about how can you build a good brand of your company if your team doesn't even buy into your brand or what you're really trying to deliver. And I love what you talked about there in terms of branding is the promise that you make. The brand is how you live up to that promise. And that also leads to the leader of the pack. If you can't live up to the brand you're promising to your people, then they're not going to believe the brand you're trying to create for your business either. Is that really the big message here?
Oh, yeah. You hit the nail on the head. That is so true. I spend every day trying to be the kind of manager that I want my people to work for. So it's the golden rule. It's do unto others as you wish they would do unto you. But it's even more than that. It's do unto others as they wish you would do, because their
Mm.
needs are different. I have people who learn audibly and people who learn better by something written or just the way you communicate. Every single individual is different. And I think what we've forgotten in business, and I'm starting to write another book about this, it's not about the numbers. Oh, yes, the numbers are definitely important because if you don't get the numbers right, you won't be able to pay anybody and it's not fun, okay? Including yourself. You need to be able to pay everybody. But they've forgotten that we're all taking care of each other. My next book is going to be called Love, Leverage, and Logistics: How You and Your Business Can Change the World. Think that all of us entrepreneurs have the ability to create this jerk-free bubble, a safe place for nice people to work, and to live the highest life, the best, kindest, wisest, good decisions, good treatment, everything. And I think we can do it. And there's something like, I looked at a census years ago, and something like 90 some odd % of all the businesses in the United States had 9 or fewer employees. That's a massive force for good. If we stop looking at the jerks on TV pretending to be bosses. Mostly they reflect Hollywood. My whole family was in show business, and so was I, and I would never go back to that business. It's a terrible, cutthroat, egotistic, narcissistic business. We have the ability to create these pockets of goodness and have happy customers and happy workers and happy worker families and the whole thing. And it's all there within our grasp. We just have to do it one at a time.
I think it's a phenomenal message. And you know what? I'm so happy to hear you're writing another book because I was going to recommend you should write another book. Don't be a jerk. I think it'd be fantastic. The fact that you're writing it is phenomenal. We'd love to have you back on once you do because I think it'd be a really good conversation. How can people learn more, get more information from you?
I've done a good job with my own SEO. So if they just Google Kristin Zhivago, they'll get pages and pages of stuff. Our website for our business is Zhivago Partners, Amazon, Roadmap to Revenue: How to Sell the Way Your Customers Want to Buy. It's Kindle, audio, hardcover, whatever. It's in all those different formats. And I write a blog. I also write sort of a off to the side blog called Kristin's Wisdom. It's mostly for younger people entering the business world. Teach them things about behavior because we don't do enough of that.
Great. Thank you for joining us here today. This is awesome.
Thank you. Good questions.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, interviewing your customers and really listening, and this isn't necessarily just interviewing saying, hey, why did you buy and so forth, but really getting curious about their journey and breaking down where in the journey they could be served better by your brand.
Yeah, and certainly when you think about that, the amount of money we waste trying to market our business, when we don't really know the journey to which our customers want to go through in their buying process, is a big miss. There's millions of dollars just wasted. Google ads make a ton of dough on people just posting ads out there for people to click on. And then people click on it, get to the website and realize this isn't the process I want to go through to make this decision, whatever that may be. And so I really like the way she talked about the scrutiny analysis, right? The light scrutiny all the way to the intense scrutiny, and really thinking through that process for your customer. And at some point those change. Like, you never thought you would go online and buy a car. I bought my last car. I bought a Tesla online. The buying process was unbelievable. I never thought I would do it. I was like, I got to feel the car. I got to go for a test drive. I got to do this. But some people have made this buying journey so seamless, so easy, that it really is memorable. You take all these different processes that are cut out of it. It just makes things really enjoyable. And so when you think about the mindset of a buyer that's going through your company today, do you really understand the buying journey and what they like and don't like about it? And my guess is you probably don't.
Really funny you say that about buying a car. The last 2 cars that Shelby and I bought were purchased. They were pre-owned cars, so they weren't brand new. And we bought them sight unseen. Was it the car that you did that with? Was that new or was that pre-owned?
It was new.
It was new. Okay. So there seems like an extra level of being a daredevil in that process for me to have done it with pre-owned. But they both worked out well. I'm sure it doesn't always work out well, but they both worked out well. So you're right. Remapping that customer journey, that who'd have thought that people would do that with a new car or a pre-owned car. I love mindset stuff. We've had a number of guests who have been on who've talked about mindset. I just say mindset and I'm ready to take notes. I've never heard before this mindset-driven marketing. And she broke it down into the 3 components. What are their desires, their concerns, and their questions? Now, what's interesting is considering those 3 things around potentially the different buyer personas. You may have multiple buyer personas who all have a different desire, concern, and question set. I thought that was fascinating and something I'm going to spend more time with.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You just say that too, because in some cases, for example, if my wife and I are making a decision on something, we may have different desires ourselves, but we're the one purchaser, right? So it can get more and more complicated depending on the level of decision you're making. And we also talked about these 5 Ps and the people, the products, the passion, the process, the policies. And there's a couple of things to note in that I thought was really interesting. The idea of process, and the one thing she talked about was servant leadership and the idea of a process. Do you actually ask your team very simple questions like, what sucks here? What is not working? What can be done? How can I make your life easier? I'm here as a servant to you, as a leader. What are the 2 or 3 things I can unblock to make your job more enjoyable here, make this process make a lot more sense? We only have to do things 1 time, not 10 times. That whole process piece is so important. So we started diving into, Rich, a whole different angle to this conversation, which is you have your external facing buyer journey and you have your internal facing team journey of how they're experiencing your brand. And when you think about it, she talked about branding is really the promise you're making, and brand is whether you're keeping it or not. What is the brand you actually live by every day? But it's not just the brand of your company, it's you. The brand is your leadership. Both of those need to be tied at the hip, because if you're doing one and not the other, it's not going to work.
I love that you just brought that up again, is the branding is a promise you make and the brand is the promise that you keep. And it's interesting because they're not often separated like that in the way that Kristin did it. Thinking about branding is an act of putting forward what the promise is. Branding on the radio, branding with a logo, branding with an image. But the brand that people know you by is the brand that people experience, which is the delivery on that promise. I thought that was really deep as well. And John, I want to remind you, one of the things she said, I highlighted it for both of us. It's never too late to decide to be a nice person.
Yeah, and sometimes we question this, but unlike TV, nice guys sometimes finish first.